Hello, Blazer fans, Blazers Edge readers. Welcome to another edition of the Blazers Edge Videocast. I'm Sam Tung, along with Dave Decker. We are actually, in this video, shifting gears away from playoff basketball, and we're actually talking about the end of a couple of eras of Trailblazer basketball, both with Rick Adelman last week retiring from his position as head coach for a number of different teams, most recently of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And of course, on Monday, Dr. Jack Ramsay passing away at the age of 89. So a couple of true Portland icons, Dave. And this is an opportunity for us to talk a little bit, and really for you, I should say, to talk a little bit about both of these two guys and their relationship with Oregon basketball, Portland basketball, and kind of that culture of basketball that has been created over the last 30 to 40 years here in the Northwest. So we're going to be talking a little bit, of course, about Dr. Jack and Rick Adelman, try to tie the two together because it really seems like the two had such a tremendous impact on the Northwest and its relationship to basketball, even though they both coached in different eras. So, Dave, I know that you've written a longer piece. It's up on blazersedge.com. You can check it out now. A long piece that you actually wrote last year when Dr. Jack retired from the mic as an NBA commentator. But just wanted you to. There was one part of that, Dave, where you talked about how when that team won the championship in 1977, the first and only of Trailblazers history, you talked a lot about how that championship really changed the way that kids played basketball in communities, the way that parents have been passing along that tradition here in the Northwest. So wanted you to kind of elaborate on that and the impact that that 77 championship had on really the basketball culture here in Portland.
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. If there's no title happening the way it did in 1977, you don't have this same Trailblazers franchise that you do today. They might still be here, although even that, I think, might be a little doubtful. If you think of the abject horror that happened in the Trailblazer or the Jailblazers era and how the relationship with the fans soured, a lot of franchises, I think, wouldn't have survived that. A lot of franchises would have looked to have been on the move. And what you got to realize is when it comes to the relationship between a town and its sports teams, it's not just the flower that you see on top that matters, it's the roots. And you can have a great season or two, but if you don't have deep roots, it's hard to keep that enthusiasm going generationally. You're only as good as your last win. The Blazers have always been better than that, and that's directly because of what Jack Ramsay and that 77 team did. Before they did that, there really was no professional basketball tradition in Portland. The team had only been around for 7 years. They had been up and down. There was some enthusiasm. Of course, the franchise paints it as an idyllic time, but that was for a few, really. I mean, the team hadn't hit the broader public consciousness. When that team went on a streak in the 77 playoffs and beat LA, and people realized they were going to the NBA Finals, and then the momentum picked up, and then it's being viewed in 90% of the homes across the state, and then they won it, and then there's the parade. All of a sudden, you transformed everyone, not just in a basketball sense, but in a community sense. It bonded the city of Portland and in many ways the state of Oregon in a way that few things could. We're not used to that. We're not used to that now. We weren't used to it then. We're fractured. Everybody has agendas, what have you. This was the one thing that spanned every generation, that spanned genders, that spanned in most ways economic strata, that you could sit and talk about the Blazers with anyone. And that transformed not just our community, but our sense of the importance of basketball. Had the Blazers not done that, they would have been just a team. And, you know, we wouldn't have the following we have nowadays. I mean, Blazers Edge owes its existence in many ways to the history of this team. And we absolutely owe a debt to Jack Ramsay for inspiring that, for being the coach through that, for bringing his game of basketball there and helping Walton, Lucas, etc., give us memories that have sustained us throughout several iterations of our community consciousness.
So much of what Jack Ramsay was known for, Dave, was his team style of basketball. And that's something that he preached, you know, from his early days as a coach all the way through, you know, really the end of his life when he was a commentator at ESPN. He was kind of the expert on that. And you talked about, you know, all these different innovative pieces that he brought into the NBA game, like an emphasis on training and making sure that his bigs continue to be athletic and having you know, a front court player base the basket and all these different types of things. But I think that what trumps all of it is the fact that his emphasis on team and his emphasis on, you know, that sacrifice that it takes in order to win a championship. It seems like, Dave, that that is something that a community, I mean, even we've seen recently over the last 5 or 6 years, I'm talking post-Jailblazer era, it seems like those are the types of teams that communities really rally behind. And it seems like, ironically, his coaching style almost created a team atmosphere within the community as well.
Indeed. And if you look on the court at what the Blazers did, it was really beautiful. I mean, the pattern in those days was either you had a big like Artis Gilmore who was down in the post, bigger than everybody else, slow, and just pounded the ball in, or you had, of course, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was awesomely talented, wielded that sky hook like it was a sword, just cutting up the opponent, but he was a finisher for the most part. Look at what Ramsay did with Bill Walton. I mean, obviously Walton is a megawatt talent, but he was not just a scorer and not just an interior player, but he moved the ball off the dribble. He moved the ball off the pass. He was the hub of the offense, and you never knew when that ball hit his hands whether he was going to put it in or whether you had to worry about any of the 4 players on the court with him. And they created a team that was more than the sum of its parts, which of course is the golden standard for all, you know, fan hopes and dreams. And it's really what we hope in life for all of us, right? I mean, there's you, there's me, we do okay, whatever, but it's the synergy between us, the relationships between us where life flourishes and life prospers. And this is the lifeblood of a city community and politics and religion and everything else. Somehow, Ramsay and that team captured that on the floor that caught people's imaginations. They saw it and they dreamed that we all could be more than we were. And little Portland at that time took the national spotlight, and in our hearts have never given it back. And we still live by some of those creeds. And as I said, Blazers Edge owes a debt communally, also in the way we operate to the ethos of that 77 team. So Ramsay was certainly one of the founding fathers, one of the most influential people in the history of basketball in this city.
Talking a little bit and shifting our gears a little bit here, Dave, to another guy who, you know, recently retired last week, actually, and that's Rick Adelman, a guy that, while he did not win a championship in Portland, will surely and always be remembered for those 2 title runs to the NBA Finals that he took this Trailblazer team in both 1990 and 1992. So talk a little bit, too, about, you know, this is a guy that we talked about Ramsay and how his team game was able to really capture the community's attention and really create a statewide camaraderie. If you think about Rick Adelman, this is a guy that was really rooted in the Northwest as well. You know, he's originally from California, but played as a Trailblazer in the early 70s, also was the head basketball coach at Chemeketa Community College in Salem then moved as an assistant to Portland, worked his way up to eventually be that head coach for the Trailblazers. And that was another team that was obviously a very team-oriented team in terms of style of play. So talk a little bit, too. Obviously, these are two very different eras, two teams that made it to the championship decades apart, but still Rick Adelman retiring at the age of 67, you think back 20 years, and boy, what an impact did he have on this community as well.
Yeah, as you say, a little different era, a little different circumstances. Adelman came in after Mike Schuler was let go. Schuler had been Coach of the Year, a great X's and O's guy, but had problems with player relations and couldn't quite get the chemistry and the synergy working right. Adelman was his unassuming assistant coach, kind of stepped in because in many ways he was the guy who had a relationship with these players that Schuler couldn't build. And Adelman did two things really, really well. He knew how to feature his star players, and he knew, I think, how not to overcoach. He would set his guys up for success, but then he would let them proceed to earn it. So you get the idea of Clyde Drexler ascending to be an all-NBA player. You get guys like Buck Williams and Kevin Duckworth making the most of their abilities under Rick. Obviously Terry Porter as well, Jerome Kersey. I mean, the list could go on. He demanded excellence from his players, but he was in the role of setting up the bar and then saying, okay, now you guys go and get it. And they did. They really responded to the trust that he showed in them and to the confidence that he had in them. And boy, did they earn it. I mean, those teams were spectacular, and they ran over basically everybody in the league. I'll never forget during that era, I was driving public transportation a little bit, and I was picking up these people from Utah. And they said, oh, you guys got the Trailblazers up here. You guys never lose, right? And that was pretty much the story. Rick had these guys never losing. And, you know, he struggled in Golden State after because I don't think he had the talent, but prospered really well in Houston. And he was the kind of guy who, if he had the stars that could live up to his vision, that he really prospered. If his players fell short, he wasn't the guy who could get them over that hump or bring them beyond themselves, but he gave them the space and permission to be everything that they could be, and certainly left an indelible mark on Blazer basketball as well. This was the next generation. You got to remember, there was not a ton between the Ramsay championship teams and the Adelman's finals teams. There was a dip in there. Yes, we had Kiki Vandeweghe and Jim Pax and some other things, but the Blazers never really ascended the heights. Adelman brought the community the confirmation that, yes, they could be great again, and showed them how that could be done.
Now moving to this era, Dave, and it seems like, you know, the common thread here is having a quality coach that really understands how to involve the players that he has and playing this team style of basketball, and really as how that is a reflection of the community at large. Talk a little bit about, you know, if you see any similarities between, you know, the current head coach of the Trailblazers, Terry Stotts, and either one of these guys. And I think that's not to say that he is one of these two, but I know that there's been a lot of talk about how these teams parallel and mirror those old championship teams for the Trailblazers, and really how Terry Stotts holds Dr. Jack in such high regard. So talk a little bit about, or really kind of expand on the idea of how this team is a reflection of maybe Trailblazer eras past.
I think you can do that actually for both of Portland's recent head coaches. I mean, Nate McMillan had more of a Clyde Drexler situation when he had Brandon Roy, and he really made the most of him, and I think would have done the same for Aldridge and Oden had everybody been healthy. It was taking a while for the shakedown crews for everybody to get integrated, but he was kind of almost the Rick Adelman guy, a little more emphasis on defense and what have you, but he was the guy who was going to make the stars shine. Whereas Terry Stotts harkens back to Ramsay in terms of the passing offense, team basketball, trying to get them to push the tempo when appropriate, spreading the floor, obviously. The homage that Stotts is paying to Ramsay has not gone unnoticed. This is the closest right now to that 77 style that we have seen. Now, you have to remember that the Blazers in 77 had the best center in basketball that year, since Walton was outplaying Jabbar, and among the best power forwards, if not the best power forward, plus a lot of players who would go on to be coaches. I mean, very cerebral staff there on the floor. It's not quite the same talent-wise for these Blazers, but the style and the emphasis is, and I think that's a credit to Stotts that he has brought that back in an era where it's not in vogue anymore, where it is still in many ways about the stars and the marquee. So yeah, Stotts absolutely might be Jack Ramsay Part 2, and to the extent he aspires to be that, I think that's a good thing.
Well, again, the end of a couple eras of Trailblazer basketball, Dave, both Rick Adelman retiring at the age of 67, only one of 8 coaches, Dave, that have won 1,000 games in their NBA careers. So very illustrious career by Rick Adelman, and the fact that he could coach until he's almost 70, you know, is a testament really to how great of a coach he was. And obviously, the great Dr. Jack Ramsay passing away on Monday at the age of 89. It certainly probably won't think of Plaid on the sidelines the same way, Dave, but he was.
Absolutely.
He was the man, and
you know, in closing, we should say, you know, thank you to both gentlemen. I mean, that's the point. Not so much even just to reminisce, but to say, hey, we noticed. It made a difference. The Trailblazers would not be the same without either of these gentlemen. And to the Ramsay family, to Rick Adelman, and best wishes for his wife and his family. And to both gentlemen, it's not just coaching, it's not just basketball. It made a difference beyond what you know to kids and to people, to all of us. So thank you to both.
And that's going to do it for us here on the Blazers Edge videocast. Obviously, a very busy time here on BlazersEdge.com. So keep it here for all the playoff news and everything else that's going around on Blazerland. So keep it here on BlazersEdge.com for all of that. And that's going to do it for us here for Dave Deckard. I am Sam Tung. Once again, thank you so much for joining us here on the videocast. We'll see you all very, very soon.